Hey, good evening. Welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I am the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. We've been working our way through a verse-by-verse study of Matthew 24, and this evening I want to share some thoughts on verses 32 and 33 before we jump into Matthew 24:34 and the futurist nightmare, this generation. That will be a good study. We'll definitely spend a few videos on that text. But before we do, I'll just share some thoughts on these couple of verses. I'm going to read the text and we'll jump in here. Matthew 24:32 and 33. Now learn a parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you too, when you see all these things, recognize that he or it is near, right at the doors. Now, I'm sure we are all aware of this, but I'll say it anyways, that this fig tree and the putting forth of its leaves does not represent the restoration of national Israel, ethnic Israel. Matthew 24 is about the destruction and removal of national, ethnic Israel. This text has nothing to do with their restoration, as our dispensationalists would claim. That idea is so foreign to the text, it is staggering to even consider. Now, enough on that. Let's get into the text and actually see what Jesus says. He calls this a parable. So he says when he uses, and by the way, in Luke 21, Jesus says, learn a parable from the fig tree and all trees. So this isn't just about the fig tree or a fig tree. It's about all trees. And he's telling them they can learn a lesson from this parable. And he calls the putting forth of leaves of the fig tree a parable. Well, how is that a parable? Well, he explains it in the next verse. He says, so you too, when you see these things, recognize, and the things he's talking about are the signs within his prophecy. When you see these signs, recognize that he is near, right at the doors. So here's the parable. Here's the understanding. Just as the leaves blossoming on a fig tree represent summer is near, the changing of a season, so the fulfillment of the signs in Jesus' prophecy represent the end of the age, the changing of a season, a new covenant world. That's the parable. And Jesus is telling his disciples, when you see all of these signs that I've given you, understand summer is near, so to speak. There's a new world, a new season, a new era, a new age that is about to dawn upon you. That's what he's telling his disciples. And here's the cool thing. He says, when you see all these things, know that it is near, right at the doors. What's near? What they had asked about in verse 3. His coming, the end of the age, and the destruction of Jerusalem. When they would see the signs that he prophesied, know that it was near. He was near, right at the doors. Here's what's amazing to me. Jesus gave his disciples very specific signs. Notice this. In verse 15, he talked about them seeing the abomination of desolation. In verse 21, the great tribulation. Verse 24 and following, we have the arrival of these false Christs and false prophets. And back up in verse 14, we have the Great Commission that was commanded to be fulfilled before the end of that age could come. All of those signs the disciples saw in their generation, in their lifetime. Daniel, not only Jesus, but Daniel, in Daniel 9, Daniel 11, and Daniel 12, said that the abomination of desolation would be accomplished in his lifetime. Revelation 7, Revelation 14 placed the Great Tribulation in their generation also. It was the first fruits of Christians that would go through the Great Tribulation. And Paul, of course, throughout his epistles, wrote extensively on the fulfillment of the Great Commission. He used every single Greek word that Jesus used to command the commission. He used those same Greek words to tell his disciples, to tell his world that commission had now been accomplished in his lifetime. So all of those signs had been fulfilled in the first century generation without a shadow of doubt. No doubt about it. And here's the thing. In Mark's version of the Olivet Discourse, it says that Matthew, James, and John when asked Jesus privately about the destruction of Jerusalem. So James, the Apostle James, was one of the disciples that heard Jesus tell all these signs, give this entire prophecy, and Jesus said to him, when you see all these things, know it's near, even at the doors. Go with me to James chapter 5. James, knowing that these signs had been accomplished, that the end was near, that the parousia was therefore near, he says this in James chapter 5, verses 8 and 9. Watch this. You too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming, that's the parousia of the Lord, is near. James knew the signs. Jesus said, when you see these signs, know it's near. James saw the signs. James knew the signs were fulfilled. He said the parousia of the Lord was near. Then in verse 9, James says this, do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. Same Greek word as Matthew 24, verse 33. Jesus said, when you see these signs, know the end is near. Know it's near, even at the door. James said, the coming of the Lord is near. The parousia of the Lord is drawn near. The judge, that is Jesus, is standing at the door. That's amazing. Jesus said, when you see these signs, know it's near. I am near, even at the doors. James saw all the signs. He knew the signs were accomplished. He said the coming, the parousia of the Lord was near, even at the door. And the judge stands at the door. Why did James identify Jesus as judge? Well, because Matthew 24 and a host of other texts, of course, represent judgment. They were about the Lord's judgment, his parousia, his coming in judgment, which we've demonstrated over and over and over again. When all those signs would be accomplished and the end was near and his coming was at hand and he would be at the door, he would be at the door as judge. He would be ready to judge that old covenant world and repay them according to their deeds. He would come in judgment upon those who had killed his prophets, killed him, rejected the message of his apostles and prophets, and refused to enter the kingdom and the inheritance that he died to provide. The judge was standing at the door 2,000 years ago. The parousia was at hand 2,000 years ago. This is amazing. All those signs were accomplished 2,000 years ago. And in the very next text, the very next verse, which we're going to get to next video, Jesus says this. You know, this is just amazing. The context of this, the flow of this is so simple. He says, when you see all these signs, all these things that I've prophesied, recognize that it is near, even at the doors. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. I mean, just logically think about this. All of these signs have been accomplished. James knew it. James heard of it. He had read all the other epistles. He knew the end was near. He knew the judge was standing at the door. He said so. And Jesus said, when you see all these things, know it's near. No, it's at the doors. And then he guaranteed it by this promise. This generation won't pass away until all these things take place. I mean, just think about it. James is there nearing the end of that generation, telling his readers, the end is near, the judge is standing at the doors, but we don't think it's going to be accomplished, or we don't think it was accomplished in that generation. Man, well, more to say when we pick it up next time, and we'll get into verse 34 on Answers on Eschatology. We'll see you then. Bye for now.